the recording. Okay, now I can share my screen. Okay, so he will be sharing with us what a rain garden is and how they decrease flooding and increase water quality, how to use rain barrels and what their benefits are, and then sharing about other low impact development practices and how to implement them at your place of work or home. So we're so excited to have you, Kane, and you are an enthusiastic individual. So thank you so much for being willing to talk to us. We are all very, very excited. And I will be able to share this link with anybody who share the recorded talk link with anybody who is interested. I'll also be posting it on the Grays Harbor Stream Team Facebook page and the Grays Harbor Stream Team website, because we just created a new website. So that's really exciting. If you haven't heard, we're going to have the Stream Team is having a beach cleanup on the 5th of March out here at Bonji Road. And we also have a great talk coming up next Thursday. Lee, who's actually here with us this evening, is going to join me in talking about how to report pollution and what it looks like and how to spot it. So that'll be exciting talk as well. And this picture that's actually on the slide behind the text is a wonderful picture that she took of some nasty stormwater pollution. So we'll be looking forward to that talk next Thursday. So I will hand it off to you, Kane, to get started.
And do I have, can I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be.
Do I have that ability? Okay, cool. Okay, I think this should be all right. Just let me know if you can see it.
It's almost there. Awesome.
Whew.
Oh, you're on your notes, so you might want to switch.
How do I switch that?
You can drag the top. Oh yeah.
Can I do it?
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Perfect. Oh, that's so nice. Okay, well, thank you, Alexa. That was a great introduction, and that talk that you're gonna have next week sounds really interesting too. So thank you guys for having me. I'm just gonna talk to you about all things LID practices for tonight. So I'll start with a content overview. I was just gonna give an introduction for myself, which Alexa kind of already did. Just kind of go into basics of stormwater runoff in case we need it. And then, as Alexa also explained, go into the rain gardens and what they can do, go into rain barrels and what they can do, and then some other LID practices that are great to implement at work or home. So starting off, as it says, my name is Kane Osstifin. I'm currently the Senior Stormwater Specialist for City of Olympia, Washington. I've been here for about 1.5 years now. Prior to that, I was a Senior Environmental Specialist for the City of Toledo, Ohio, where I'm actually from. So my current duties include doing private stormwater inspections around the city to maintain that those systems are working properly. I'm also involved in our other stormwater permitting aspects that involve spill response to make sure that we are educating the public on what to look for and also how to correct any actions of spills that we find in our city limits. In Toledo, I did mostly those same things. I did a little bit more water quality sampling. I did a little bit more wastewater reconnaissance too, and permitting, and a lot more environmental response, but it relatively is the same thing. And then as you see on here, I've also put Reingard Initiative because at Toledo, I was a part of a group that was with other public agencies called the Reingard Initiative that focused on helping citizens learn what a rain garden is and rain barrels and how to use the tools and implement them to construct their own rain gardens on their sites if they so choose to and if they're able to. So I was able to help out with that. I built them a new website, and that was actually really, really fun. Prior to that, I worked for the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency as an environmental specialist. That time I was in the Department of Air Pollution Control. So I worked with air permits, and that's where I actually began my whole journey with environmental regulations, because prior to being the specialist for a little while, I had begun as an intern there. So it spans pretty much all the kind of regulations that you could for environmental, air and water. I think water is the place that I really enjoy being. And then this picture is just of me that my coworker that I took over for took of me, I think probably last year, maybe when I started, just looking in those manhole covers. Maintenance holes is what we call them now. So that's just a little bit about me. Next is just a little recap of what we know about urban stormwater runoff and what it is. Stormwater runoff, as we may know, is just rain or snowmelt that flows over the land, on your roofs, on your houses. It goes over the surfaces, it goes over the roadways, and then it doesn't soak into the ground until it finds that grassy area or that waterway. But while it's traveling down those impervious surfaces, it can pick up any kind of pollutant and put that into the streams, lakes, or the groundwater that we drink from. That includes trash, different kind of chemicals, dirt and sediment, all that stuff that we really do not want to see in any of that runoff that can cause contamination to our drinking water or our lakes or the environment, ruining the health of fish or humans. And to combat those actions, we've got regulations in place for pollution prevention that we like to focus on education and outreach, which we've realized is probably one of the strongest ways to help people understand what we're looking for and what they can do on their own to prevent any of those pollutants from getting into the stormwater and into our local waterways. Erosion and sediment control standards, which is just making sure that that dirt and sediment doesn't get off-site. Those are mostly for construction sites and any other things that get put into place within cities. And then we've got our tried and true LIDs, those low impact development standards that we're going to talk about today. That's just my little quick overview of stormwater runoff and basically what my entire job is, but stormwater is really fun. So next, I just wanted to go over like what are LID practices. So LID stands for low impact development. They include systems and practices that use or mimic the natural processes. So you're that you can get that infiltration and not that runoff. So we're trying to get that stormwater back into the ground and protect any of that water quality before it picks up any of those trash or harmful chemicals. So they can be used to preserve, store green spaces, using soils and vegetations, and they can also be used to harvest rainwater. So the idea is that we're approaching a more land development that works with the nature, and it is there to manage stormwater closer to its source. So that way, instead of having it travel a longer distance, the water traveling a longer distance down that impervious surface, you're catching it closer to where it hit a roof or a pavement or a parking lot, and you've got it there in that more natural area that you were able to develop. So it catches it, it reduces risks of that pollution being carried away or flooding, and it really is a better idea to get that infiltration to happen faster. And also when you've got more green spaces, it just beautifies the area even more. And this last part, that they're a better alternative to the previous goal of get water offsite. And by that, I mean, when stormwater regulations were first up and coming, I believe it may have been back, really started kicking up in the 80s. I think one time at a convention, someone told me that the first way of stormwater was to get it offsite. You wanted to get the water offsite, you didn't want it to be anywhere near it. And now, as we've progressed throughout the years, we've noticed that that is probably not the best way to think. And instead, the better alternative is to keep it on site and to have it infiltrate on site. And that's what LIDs are a good reason to use them for. So I kind of already started saying this about why you would want to adopt some LIDs. It's helpful to reduce the amount of rainfall that runs off the surfaces. It can improve water quality, like it can prevent that pollution, those contaminants, all that sediment and dirt from running into the waterways, reducing those flooding events because you're able to have it infiltrate more on site. You're able to contain it more rather than for it to run down and pool in a parking lot or your driveway or any other businesses, local, commercial, or downtowns. Improve the groundwater recharge, like I said, that way using LIDs to get that water in that green space or keep it closer to the site where it started, it can infiltrate faster and it can recharge that groundwater that we want to see decently high enough, so we don't want to like be without that for a while. And then, like I also said, more green spaces, more beauty. It can enhance your neighborhood. It can look better. It looks better if you've got more natural flowers and plants along your driveway, in your yard, or along the paths of parking lots, or the strips that run down your roads. And that also brings in those, if you use native plants that we recommend for like rain gardens, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that beautifies your area even more and allows you to also create more spaces for those animals and creatures and organisms to kind of hang out in. And then also mitigate urban heat island effect. I put that one in there because that way, if you've got more trees or you got more green spaces, it'll reduce the overall heat that pavement, concrete, impervious surfaces like to absorb, and it keeps the area more hot. That's why you see, like, you know, trees downtown to reduce that heat effect that concrete does. So I've just got this, I hope it's viewable enough. It may have been stretched out a little bit, but this picture was just, it's one of my favorite pictures when you're talking about stormwater runoff and the differences it has. So I think you can see my cursor. The top one, it shows about how in a natural ground cover, you've only got about like 10% runoff, because most of it with all that natural cover is being infiltrated. 25% of it can be infiltrated, 40% of it can mostly be absorbed by the sun and evaporate away. But it's able to, you've got not a lot of runoff because it's being dispersed very nicely. When you increase the amount of impervious surface, like when you get a house in this next picture, it reduces the evapotranspiration, it increases the runoff, it decreases the infiltration. So we're getting more of that runoff that we don't want because we've developed more of the land. If you go down to the next picture on the left, you've got 30 to 50% impervious surface, higher runoff, less infiltration, which means it's going to be able to pick up more pollutants as it goes, and it just will go down the paths of least resistance to any waterways. And then the next one is 100% impervious, so your cities or your other towns. Large amount of runoff. I believe that says 55 or 56% runoff, 5% infiltration, not much evapotranspiration. So you just have more of that runoff that picks up more of those pollutants, and it just takes more of it all the way to our local waterways and groundwater that we just don't want it to be there. And that's why LIDs will be more able to mimic that natural ground cover, or to get a little bit back to there so we can reduce that runoff percentage. So next, the right time to apply LIDs. Anytime is the right time, and there's no wrong time. Obviously, before development, early planning stages of a new construction site or anything is the best, because that way you're starting from scratch. But that's all right if you can't do that. If you've already got it at your house, you know, or you're a contractor that you're gonna, you need to look at developments that you've done before, it's all right. You can even do it after post-development. You just have to know a few other things. If you're going to do it after development, you've got to look and see how you want to redirect your roof runoff if you can, where the best place to put rain gardens is on site, and then a lot of retrofitting to capture and infiltrate that stormwater. So you're going to have to look at the area as it's already built and kind of figure out where the water goes, where its path is, and what is best to capture that water in itself. And that applies to not just developments of like commercial and industrial places, but also with your house, where it'll probably be best for, if you want to have rain gardens, you want to find that area that is best suited for that rain garden to be constructed. Which the next we'll go into rain gardens. Rain gardens are really, really nice. They're considered just depressions of the area that will collect rainwater from your roof or your driveway or your streets. And then it's just a depression in the ground. And I've got a picture, I've got a diagram next up after this. But rain gardens are the depressions in the ground that just allow water to run into it and just stay there instead of getting to the street or getting to your driveway. And it just sits there and it just slowly infiltrates. The great part is when water is able to infiltrate into the ground, it's able to filter out and catch all those pollutants that you would have in the runoff if you were to let it go away. Like it says here, when your rain garden is filled with natural native plants, which is what we recommend, you give food and shelter to butterflies, birds, other wildlife. Rain gardens can also be considered butterfly gardens as well if you put certain plants in them. And then also with rain gardens, it can reduce the flooding to any neighborhood properties. So if you know about times when water runs off your site, and if you have the yard and space to do it, a rain garden would be good for that, to catch that water. And then, as I mentioned before, rain gardens are also great to increase the amount of water to recharge local groundwater system. This is just a picture of a type of rain garden. It's just got a lot of different plants, mostly native, and it just allows the area for it to soak. Whatever water comes off of that house in the background is able to hit that garden first and stay there and infiltrate faster. That way, less of it is able to run off of their property and probably into the streets to create that runoff. So this is, I sometimes try to call this like a tried and true diagram because I've used it. I used it in the past working with others with the Reingard Initiative. And I think it just really is a nice, colorful example of what a rain garden can do, and it just tells you how it works. So basically, there's a set amount. You've got your house, you've got your rain coming down, you've got it coming down your gutters and your downspouts. And then sometimes it depends on what you want to do. You can have it like it shows here. You could have your gutters connected directly from the house and going directly into the garden, or you can have it not do that if it's not possible and it just spills over your lawn until it gets there. So water comes down, it goes into that depression. As you can see, you've got it's just a lower area full of those plants. It's stopped over by a berm to hold back any excess water from being able to just continue out onto, say, the street or somewhere else. And then because the rain garden is full of native plants, which are better to use in your local area because native plants are considered native to the area that you find them in, which means they've been there a very long time and they're able to sustain the natural weather patterns that are happening in that area. So native plants that are here in the Pacific Northwest are going to be different from plants in the Midwest or the Southeast or anywhere else. Native plants also do have these deep roots, as it says here, so they're able to anchor in more and hold the soil, and that way they can also encourage more infiltration and help absorb those nutrients. So those plants also, while the rainwater from your roof is going into that ground, those roots can also take up and filter out any of those pollutants and suck up those pollutants that would normally be in that runoff that would go through the ground into your waterways and harm the local wildlife or even human health sometimes. This is the diagram picture. The next slide I have is just an actual picture of a rain garden. So that way you can kind of see from the cartoon to the real aspect. So they can be made in many different ways. This one is really interesting because you can see it's right by the sidewalk. But if you were to construct your own, you would have to find that best spot where your water does travel to, dig down a little bit. And as you can see, this one's got a little perimeter of just solid concrete bricks around to keep it up, and just the landscaping aspect of it. It's got this nice pad of loose rocks. That way the water can travel from anywhere up here and it can get its way into the garden. This garden, you can set them up many different ways. This one is just one aspect of it where you've got certain flowers in certain areas, And I know that there are many, many different ways, depending on how you want the sun to hit them, or what ones you want best to soak up how much water, or which ones, what flowers best go to their flowers, you can put them in here. And then they're low maintenance. It's just to make sure that they operate well, that the water's getting in there, the water's sinking down. You shouldn't probably have you should not have water sit there for more than 48 hours. The water should definitely be able to soak down within that time period. If it doesn't, then there might be an issue. But I just wanted to show off a rain garden like this, which is different from both the diagram that we saw in the last slide and the one prior to that, which had different plants. So that was just the rain gardens. They're really nice. They're really nice for your lawns. They're and all that they can do with the stormwater infiltration. And then we've got rain barrels. So rain barrels are used to capture anything from any runoff from your roof, and they hold it for later use. You can use it to water your lawn, water your lawns, water your gardens, or your indoor plants. It reduces the amount of water that flows from your property, so you can keep it in its canister. The best thing that people do normally is they do what's called a downspout disconnection. So as you see this picture with this rain garden rain barrel, it is set next to the house. It's set up on those blocks off the water, off the ground. And then this one doesn't show, this one does kind of have it. It's kind of a weird one right here, where they disconnect the bottom part of the downspout and it reroutes any of the water from up here to go into the barrel. Usually this one is not connected to the barrel. Usually they are directly connected to it. Excuse me. And then that fills up. And then it's raised up so that way you've got, it's gravity fed, so that way you can use the hose to it and you can water any of your plants. Like it says, indoor and outdoor. Rainbows are really great for that. You can harvest your water and use it. It's just a really nice system for it to get going. Oh, I guess I'll go into this. And then, well, that was the rain barrels. And this is another hot take of the downspout disconnection, because besides the rain barrel being there, you can also just do a downspout disconnection, and instead of it going directly into the sewer, because sometimes downspouts, you might see those downspouts that go directly into the ground. Normally those ones go directly to the storm sewer. And instead of doing that, you can do the downspout disconnection, like it says, to your rain barrels, to permeable areas, to your, which are, as you see in this picture, which is kind of blurry, into this green area. So that way you can infiltrate down there instead of being runoff into the streets and the parking lot. It's also very beneficial for cities that have combined sewer systems, which is just, combined sewer system is just when you've got your sanitary and your stormwater go in the same pipe down to your wastewater treatment plant. Most cities do have that separated. It is difficult to separate those in more condensed areas of older downtowns. So if it's possible to do something like a disconnect like that, even at your own house or your own business, that'd be great to do. So the next kind of LID that we can talk about, it's a really common one, is bioswales. And you can see this picture here. This is considered a bioswale area in a parking lot. So they're often found in curbs and parking lots. And a bioswale is basically, it's similar to a rain garden. It's just vegetation. It uses vegetation and mulch to slow down and let stormwater filter. All of these LIDs are all about these practices to just get that stormwater to just stay on site and just go into the ground. So as rain gardens, they're placed in long, narrow spaces that are used between sidewalks and curbs. They include grasses, herbaceous plants, shrubs, trees, and their maintenance is also, like I said, low. Yearly inspection, vegetation, and landscaping. So basically, you just want to make sure that you're maintaining the vegetation and that it's not getting overgrown and that it has enough space to have that water infiltrate. And I think I mentioned this before. any issues that you would have with bioswales like rain gardens. If the water is pooling and it's not getting down, then that's why it would be a good time to make sure that vegetation is cut back and make sure that reapplying any mulch or soil to get that infiltration to keep going. I'm sorry, I think my cat's scratching at the door. This is just a diagram as well as like with the rain barrels about what you can see for a bioswale. So you've got the inlet from the roadway up here in the left-hand corner where it's got a nice path that goes down into the bioswale itself. And you've got the different layers that it shows. So working from the bottom up, you got your native soil, then you got your gravel bed, which you keep for better infiltration. And then you have the bioretention soil. That is what is considered specific for those plants in that bioswale area. Sometimes, again, native plants. And I hope it's still very visible. But then you've also got your overflow pipe that goes out. So if the water was ever to get too high or there was a surcharge of enough water that was too much for the ground to take on, then the water can overflow into that pipe and then it can go out to an outflow. Not all bioswales have that, but some of them can have that just in case. Usually they're designed for areas that have been surveyed to assume that that could happen. So I just wanted to show this diagram of what a bioswale is compared to the picture that you saw before. So the next one, planar boxes, same thing as bioswales. They're mostly found in more commercial or downtown areas. So they're basically just urban rain gardens, but they have, like, as you can see in the picture, the vertical walls to maintain and keep them in. So they can either be in an open or closed bottoms. Like I said, usually in downtown areas. Again, they collect and absorb the water runoff from streets, sidewalks, and parking lots. If you can kind of see in these pictures, they've got some like cuts in between them to get that water from the sidewalk to go into. They're really good for the limited spaces. They help make the street beautiful again. Again, grasses, trees are found in these. You can do them at your home as well. The same thing with the rain gardens or your other businesses if you want to put them next to your parking lots, or I'm sorry, your sidewalks. So that's just another form of a rain garden, I would say. And then aside from those, the next thing I wanted to look at is permeable pavements. This is more, you can do this for your driveways, and then you can see it also in more commercial lots, as you can see in this picture here. So you've got these different pavers. Permeable pavement is different from the normal concrete that you see in every parking lot or maybe driveway. There are spaces in between the pavers that allow for better infiltration for that rainwater. So that way, instead of seeing it sheet flow and just run off the sidewalk and make puddles, it just gets captured right then and there and it just goes down. They're made of pervious concrete or pervious or porous asphalt. So it's still concrete and asphalt, but it's got more holes in it. It's got more spaces that the water can just leak through. So it reduces the amount of, like I said, that runoff that just goes off of your parking lots. It's recommended for like low volume, low speed applications. So like I said, commercial parking lots, you could do it to your driveways if you wanted to do it at home. You just have to go find that pervious concrete and just consider if that's the best option for that area. And then I'll just go to the next slide then. This is just showing like the different, how it works in this picture where you've got the concrete, it's compacted together, but it's loose enough that the water can run through it. And that's what we want to see. There's the different types, the porous asphalt, grid paver locks, reinforced grid. All of these are, I've seen most of these, they're really interesting. They allow for, I cited the direct recharge into the area. It eliminates untreated stormwater. It creates zero runoff if it's not compacted. And then the easiest way to clean them because they can get filled with sediment and dirt and all that stuff, and then they can reduce their ability to infiltrate. You would need to do a sweep it. It's basically like a vacuum, like a street sweeper, to a Vector truck to get out to clean out those little areas in between it, like these pavers. So the next one I've got is just, again, another diagram so you can see how they've got the concrete pavers up here, permeable joints in between them, and then an open bedding course. So this is just, I wanted to just do a quick view of how you see it go down. And then there's also usually an under drain that is perforated with holes in the sides. So when the water goes down and hits the pavement, it's able to also infiltrate, but also any excess water can be carried on into the storm sewer. And that's mostly found in commercial or industrial areas that have these impervious surfaces. So next is also green parking is also an addition, and it's the same thing as impervious surfaces, or it's both. So you've got, as the bottom picture shows, these green pavers for an impervious surface, but then also these basically using as bioswales or curved cuts in between parking lots. It just allows for a better beauty element of these commercial spots, and then also reduces the heat island effect. It can improve walkability in the areas of parking lots is where you mostly see them. You might see them at some of your shopping areas possibly. And then it's just a way to mitigate any runoff from parking lots to be flooded, and it gets them into these areas so that way they're not flooding anything. That's more of a commercial thing. The next thing I've got is green roofs. These can be used for both commercial and residential if you'd want. You can see this picture, it's showing the green roof on top of this roof. I'm not sure if it's an apartment building or an office building, but these are possible. They're covered with growing media and vegetation that are able to capture the rainfall and infiltrate it. And they store the water for evapotranspiration so it can be taken up back into the atmosphere. They're pretty cost effective for dense urban areas where land values are high or there's large industrial offices. I know that an office in downtown Columbus that had a rain garden on it. I know the City of Olympia office building has some green roof space on top of theirs that you can go on to. So it is possible. It just has to deal with if you wanted to do it on your roof, it has to be like a flat roof, and it would have to have a impervious tarp underneath it. So that way none of the water can get through and damage the roof of, say, your garage or your house. And then you fill that up with the soil medium, excuse me, the right amount of soil to put on your roof, and then you can plant the native plants. Always want to do native plants because they work the best to soak up that water and to last longer. And then it just stays on your roof, and when it rains, the water will just be absorbed by those plants and all will be good. They look really nice. They're also low maintenance. I've seen a few people use them and they do like their green roofs. It just takes a bit to know if it's a viable option. I've seen more rain gardens than I've seen of green roofs. Another LID that you can do, or that we see, is land conservation, which is just protecting existing open areas. This also works great. You see a lot of this nowadays with new developments where people are making sure that they are just not changing the land as it is. This is just something that I wanted to bring up to show that while it might not be possible now if you need to change what you already have, but I mean, it also works best if you've got areas near your commercial buildings or your own house. If you can preserve the land as it is and just not want to build anything else, that would be great. So there also provides recreational activities. So you see them in parks. You see a lot of those ponds around probably businesses in downtown areas, or just the parks. You see those ponds that fill up with water, those storm waters, they're nice to walk around. And then you sometimes see these signs down here that I pulled up. They'll say the critical area, where it's critical area, it's got wetlands, it's not supposed to be disturbed, so they don't disturb it. So land conservation is more of that LID that you want to get pre-development of a thing. So next is just the cost effectiveness of LIDs. So yes, using LIDs can save you money because you don't have to worry about retrofits or changing up anything. So the low cost elements to retain water, like I mentioned with the rain barrels, you keep that rain on site, you can use that to water your plants, you can lower your cost of what your water bill would be. Allowing for the increased infiltration reduces risk of flooding and pollution problems. So if you can prevent the problem before it happens, then that's more money in your pocket and less money to use. And reduce the amount of pavement, curbs, or gutters needed. So that way we're not using, you're not having to pay for any new constructions or retrofit constructions of cracked curbs, pavements, or broken gutters. And that way, instead, you've got the rainwater going directly to your rain gardens or your rain barrels or your permeable surfaces. Like then this says the reducing the cost of your detention basins and pipe systems. So that's mostly for commercial areas, or if you're in an HOA area, you wouldn't have to worry about adding more pipes, adding more of those like the detention vaults that need to be put in the ground to hold that water. Instead, you've got a nice looking rain garden or pond or green roof that just catches it for you. And then this last thing was a US EPA study of 17 LID case studies showed that there is a cost saving range about 15 to 80% using these methods instead of going with the more gray infrastructure that we use, which is making more pipes to carry that water off site or carry that water to a holding vault on site that you can't see, it's usually underground. So that's mostly everything. Other than that, these were the additional resources that I figured that I would share that you can go to. If you're curious about the rain gardens and stuff, I recommend the Western Washington Rain Garden Handbook. It's available online. This is a picture of what the front cover looks like if you got a hardback version of it. It's got everything that we talked about with rain gardens here and rain barrels and a list of plants, list of tools, and the best time to plant them. I've also used resources from Low Impact Development from the EPA website. And then also there's the Green Streets Handbook from the EPA if you're interested to look at those. And with that, that was all I had. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. Thank
Please.
you. That was great. I do have a couple questions. Let's see. So when you're doing inspections in Olympia, I know that you do inspect some commercial sites. I don't know if you do industrial sites, like sites that have industrial stormwater discharge permits. But I know that a lot of those, both commercial and industrial sites have stormwater facilities, and some of them probably have, well, they have stormwater ponds, and some of them might have some kind of planar boxes or bioswales or that sort of thing. So does the city require maintenance on those kind of facilities to make sure that they're working correctly? Or do you just leave that up to the owner to do the maintenance?
It is the requirement of the property owners to maintain those systems. But if they were, but when they are within, if they have a permit, well, commercial and industrial sites in Olympia that have stormwater infrastructures on them are required to maintain them. We say it is the property owner who has to maintain them, and that is city code. So they are required to upkeep that system so that way it does not fail.
Okay. Do you check that? Does anyone check it?
Yes, I check that.
Okay. And so say a facility, but but you don't check, do you check the ones that have industrial stormwater permits from ecology?
Yes. We don't have that many in Olympia, but it's a separate inspection from their industrial permit, where it is it's the stormwater management side of it is within our drainage manual from our drainage drain and erosion manual. So it's separate from their industrial permit, but they're still required, like every other place that doesn't have a permit, to maintain their stormwater system. And so, yeah, I'm the one that goes, it's a separate inspection altogether. So they inspect it, and then I double check to make sure that nothing has been missed.
Great, that's fantastic. And so, and one other thing, so like downtown Olympia, I know that Surfrider has all these, they call them butt cleanups, where they go to places downtown where there's like bars and taverns and stuff, and they pick up massive amount of cigarette butts. So, and I assume that there's planter boxes and, you know, that kind of thing. And sometimes, you know, those planter boxes, I've seen them, not in Olympia, but in Seattle, they're like full of cigarette butts. Some people think they're like garbage dumps or something. And so is there any kind of an outreach program to work with like restaurant owners, or I don't know what, who's responsible to keep those planter boxes or bioswales relatively clean?
I would assume that if it's a bioswales or planter boxes downtown in those more condensed areas, those might be public. So they would be under the jurisdiction of the city to maintain. And I think that maybe that would probably be a joint effort between Olympia's clean team.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it is? Clean team? Yeah. For downtown, to keep that clean. And then also part of our vegetation operations crew, who are the ones that basically do my job, but for city-owned sites. Excuse me. So they would be going down, and they would probably be making sure that they would inspect them themselves, and then they would follow up themselves to clean it. I guess you could say, though, that cigarette butts in the planter boxes, I mean, I don't want to say it's better, but I mean, I guess it's better to be captured there than to go into the stormwater and then go into a stream.
Right. Yep. Wow. Yeah.
Kind of centralizes them so they can be cleaned up, maybe.
Yeah, the whole
Maybe.
point. You keep your stormwater on site, you keep your pollutants on site so they're easy to pick up and that they're not clogging a pipe drain or something downtown or a catch basin. Oh, way better.
If only people could understand how to, you know, dispose of their cigarette butts correctly, but you know.
I
Should
don't
have
even
little
know.
doggy bags with them.
Yeah. I think I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Go for it, Art.
Go for it, Linda and RD.
So I have a question. You were talking about harvesting some of the rainwater from these things. Is there any study that says, you know, you should only harvest X% of that water and not allow it go back to the groundwater before you end up with having harm to the groundwater?
Good question. I know that certain states in the United States have rain harvesting laws and regulations about that they can and cannot harvest rainwater. I know that's kind of crazy to think. I actually do not know of any studies about saying that you can only acquire a maximum amount of water. I've never I've never heard that. It's always been collect as much as you want. I have, as I mentioned, the Reingard Initiative that I was a part of did a rain barrel workshop every year, and those were around 55-gallon drums that people could make themselves and take home for $25. It was really nice. No, there was never a max, and I know that rain barrels are, I may not have mentioned it, but you're supposed to also have kind of like a valve at the top that like any excess water can drop out of it, so that way your barrel's never completely full. So I think I've never heard about a max. Lee or Alexa, have you?
No, I haven't ever, but I mean, I'm thinking that there wouldn't be a max because typically you use that that stored rainwater to water your garden or water your yard.
So it would go back eventually anyways.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of why there wouldn't be a max. Because I know there's rules and regulations about not using that water like in your house.
Yeah.
Like you can't take that sort of water and like, I think in Washington that I remember looking up specific rules and regulations about not being able to use it like in your washing machine or in, you wouldn't want to use it to wash your dishes or anything like that, because obviously it's not clean unless you filtered it really well. Yeah.
Which I recently saw a video of a person who had a very intricate setup of his rain barrel where he was using, oh my gosh, I don't remember the name for them. It's the big cube tanks. He had 2 of those. I don't know, I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, the big like plastic cube ones that have like the metal frames around them.
Yep.
Yeah.
He had 2 of those as a system to capture his water. And I think he may have had a filtration system on it. And that's why with your question about if there's a max, I see that video and I think, no, I've still never heard about there being a max requirement, because yeah, you're supposed to use it again for your plants and it goes back, it goes back into the system eventually.
Yeah.
Talking about filtration though, I know up in Camp Seymour, they did that with all their rains. They had a 4-tube thing, and the one tube was where they irrigated with a turbine, and then the second one is they had these massive specially designed mangrove trees they kept in a greenhouse that filtered it through their roots, and then they had a cattail garden which they then filtered that, and then the last one was a chemical treatment.
Wow.
So, and that, I haven't been to Camp Seymour in a while, but that's when it was like 2005-ish.
Did they offset some of their water use with that? Like, did they actually use it to wash, like do like flushing toilets and stuff with it? Or does it just like be used to like water their gardens and stuff?
They were getting approval for toilets and hand wash because apparently there was a drinking rule for the toilets that it had to be X amount of %, because just in case something happened, you had to be able to drink the toilet water. So, but they were in 2005. They were getting permits and getting regulated and getting through the inspections. I don't know if they finally succeeded, but I do remember seeing that and talking about how they were collecting all the rainwater and they were trying to get approved for hand wash and drinking toilet water, but not shower. They said they could never get it to shower and dishwasher safe, which I don't know why there's a distinction between those two and those two.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember looking up the rules and regulations and seeing that you just can't use it for certain things in your house, that it's just not permitted because it's a public health risk or whatever. But
Public health risk, and then if you're using it in your house, it's going down your pipes, it's going to the wastewater treatment to be treated, and then pumping back out into your waterways instead of going back into the ground.
Totally
Reduces the groundwater charge, which we need that.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Question. In Northwest Washington, what do you find better works for rain garden of the 3 that, because I know the 3 distinct styles, the prairie style, the bog style, or the alpine style. Which one do you find works best for around here in the Northwest?
Ooh. Lee or Alexa, do you have that answer? I currently do not, because
Oh, Lee, you're muted.
I'm still pretty new here.
I don't know what those styles are.
I would think the bog style here on the coast, but I mean, I don't know specifically. So there's alpine, bog, or prairie. Is that what you said, Stephen?
Yeah, the prairie one uses prairie grasses, like the ones you see in Savannah, and they're the ones that are the deep tape roots that usually have max 10 feet down, and they drive it into the ground and use that as actual systems for collecting. The bog styles, they use peat moss and plants like cattails and skunk cabbage, and ones that have roots that are on the surface level so that the water stays more close to the surface, but it slowly penetrates. And then the alpine one is where you use juniper, mugo pine, Sitka willows, and other tree-based ones that have a mixture. And what they do is they're more for stabilizing the soil while giving slight deep-rooted, even though most of those are shallow-rooted ones, mixed in with some of like the mugo pines, which are the deep rooters.
I would say it would, yeah, I would say it would depend on like what area of the state you're in, because I know Eastern Washington is much different than Western Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it might be in that Western handbook. It might be in that Washington Rain Garden handbook.
Because I know like in Texas, they use a lot of the prairie ones to reactivate dead streams. Like there's a whole National Geographic movie about how a guy cut down a bunch of trees and reestablished a prairie style rain garden and activated 2 water springs on his property, because what it did, because they were the deep tape rooted one, 15 feet deep, slammed all that water directly into a I think it was a limestone deposit, and the limestone soaked it up, and so when it finally got too much water, it finally reactivated the natural spring, because the trees had been sucking up all the water. And I know they use that a lot in Texas, in the Midwest, because there's a lot of limestone. I think it's limestone. I might be wrong with that. A mineral deposit that it soaks up water and collects it and stores it. And so by using the deep tape rooted prairie grasses, it's driving all that water straight into those old desiccated holding tanks, mineral holding tanks.
Wow.
Interesting. That's really cool. Could you, Kane, could you copy and paste the resources from your slide into the chat?
Sure.
Then I can make sure to share them with the link to this talk.
And then I have one other question.
Go for it.
Go for it.
So I also know of edible. I know they're not really big here in the United States, but I've started seeing a few of them in like England and France and stuff, talking about edible rain gardens, where they use plants that are edible, like our skunk cabbages, our cattails, which they make flour out of, frogs, crawfish, and other style of things. Are we does Washington State have like any regulations? Because I've just always wondered why because we have a lot more edible swamp and prairie things that we have. But I've never really heard a lot. I've only heard it more on the European side of edible versions of rain gardens.
I've never heard of any rules and regulations against it. Have you, Lee?
No, but I think it's a bad idea. Like,
I mean, you got stuff running off your roof, you know, it depends on, I guess it depends on what kind of roof you have too.
yeah.
There are either no regulations or there are more general regulations about like, I don't know, a growing edible plants for that, or there's none at all. But it's possible. I've never heard of that before. That's interesting.
You probably wouldn't want to do if you had like a metal roof, right?
I don't know. Because the few papers I've read about is they use like cattails because they can use it for flour, because they make cattail dough and flour from it. They use the crawdads, the native crawfish in their state that have gone kind of extinct because of urbanization, but they reestablished them, and frogs, and then other like their version of skunk cabbage, and then there was a fourth one, like a berry, like almost like a cranberry. I don't really remember them, but there was those big ones they were talking about. So I saw like ways we could, but I've just never heard of it in our country really, but I've seen a little bit in Europe.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it might only be a thing for, like what you said, Alexa, if it's not off of a roof or paved areas or anything that picks up stuff.
Yeah. You don't want to be eating metal or eating pollutants, but if it's if it's coming from a source that wouldn't bring in those sorts of pollutants, then it probably would be fine. It'd be probably really cool.
Definitely.
Well, does anybody have any more questions for Kane?
Hey, Kane, it's great to see you again. And that was a
Thanks.
terrific talk. Thank you.
Good
Yeah.
to see you too.
Thank you,
That was
Kane.
very informative.
Thank you. I'm glad it was.
Kane, do you ever do tours of LID facilities or stormwater treatment stuff in Olympia? Because I think I would like to go. We used to do that in Bellingham where there's a lot to show, but out here in Grays Harbor County, there's not a whole lot to show off.
I have never done those. I'm open to them. And I know the only thing close to that is our, well, we don't do it right now. Right now it's all virtual, but before
Right.
that, I know our homeowners association spring workshop was a place where people who, they could register and they could come and we would show people on Evergreen's state campus because they had every kind of stormwater structure that you'd consider LIDs to show off to people. I don't know whenever that will come back online to be that, but there's no set up structure for tours, but I mean, I'm always open to, if anyone reaches out, to take them on something and go show them things.
That would be great. Yeah, and I know there's going to be a Lewis County stream team, and they're just starting up right now. And so I'm going to be suggesting to them to do some educational talks and stuff. Would you be interested in doing this talk for their group?
Yeah, sure. If you want me
Okay.
to, yeah.
Yeah, I'll connect you guys. Okay.
A Lewis County stream teams. I know we have a stream teams down here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more, Southern Lewis County, upper Chehalis Basin stream team, basically.
Got it. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming and joining us. This was a lot of fun. So
Good to be here.
we got to see all of the LID practices. We went over lots of them. So that was very informative and wonderful. So thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And I hope you have a lovely evening and get some dinner. Yeah. So thanks again and have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.